Exam season is here again, and every year there are tons of top level students who spend hundreds and even thousands of hours preparing for the end of year 12 exams, despite getting tripped up by never seen before curveball questions, getting the easier questions wrong, and also wasting a lot of time focusing on the wrong things. However, it is worth mentioning that you have the exact same time left as your peers to prepare for these exams. So what it really matters about now is making sure that this preparation is as high quality as possible. Hey guys, Archie here, a second year medical student, and on this channel we learn how to learn so we can spend more time intentionally on things and the people that matter the most to us. With exams only weeks away, I thought it would be the best time to make my annual how to prepare for exams video just for you guys. Since then, I have come across a few new study techniques, and this is going to happen every single year. I've changed up, my exam timetable for the better, and this has meant that I actually studied less than I did in year 11, which means also less than year 12 for some of my med school exams. And in fact, I even got full marks in some of them. So what we're gonna focus on today is why you absolutely need a plan that actually works, how to structure your revision, and then lastly, if you're running out of time, because this happens a lot of the time. So the first thing that we have to realize about exam preparation is time is limited. You will not have enough time to go through everything with the level of detail that you wanted, just like you did because you learned all this content across a year. Because of this limited time, you will not have enough time to go through all of the practice papers that you possibly could get your hands on, and nor should you either. Lots of students who solely focus on just spamming practice papers build up knowledge in isolation that can't really be used for much outside of its scope. And the main thing is like, if you don't get a practice question on a particular concept that you're struggling with, that's gonna put you at a large disadvantage for that concept itself. For example, let's just go with something simple. One year, the exam might have said, what is the function of the mitochondria? But then being able to answer that question may put you at risk of not understanding how to answer a question like, what cells contain the most mitochondria? Because there is a slight difference in nuance in terms of what is actually being focused on. They may not realize that because the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, the muscles are gonna need the most amount of mitochondria because they need most oxygen demand. I've talked a lot about this on my other videos as well, but by doing a lot of practice papers, and when you can do everything that's you've got available to you, you can actually have a law of diminishing returns, which means the time and investment that you put into questions can actually go as so far that you become complacent with certain questions, and then you miss subtle differences and are not prepared for those out of nowhere curveball questions that pop up in an exam. And I think the main thing to consider here is that there is a huge opportunity cost to focusing just on practice exams. If there is not a really, really high quality or prediction of the questions that are gonna be in your actual exam, then you're wasting time on this as opposed to focusing on something more efficient. Now, this is why we need to prioritize our learning and time so that we're focusing on the things that are gonna make the most impact for us. The thing that you'll have to prioritize is gonna be very different from what your friends are going to be doing first. Having this prioritization strategy is something that all high achievers that I know are always applying. You need to start off with your weaknesses, and then from there, you can work down that list. Do not go through things chronologically the way that you did when you learnt it the first time. Plus, by having a plan, you're gonna be able to push procrastination away quite a bit as well. And this also means that you're gonna avoid decisional delay traps. What I mean by this is if you're trying to make decisions in the moment, not only are they gonna be more emotionally based and less objective, looking at the whole picture and what you've got planned for the day, but you're gonna fall into this trap where you're gonna be making decisions based off your mood. This means that you're very easy to make a wrong decision, but also to procrastinate on a decision because you don't realize how important it is right now to get this specific done and how much it will put you out of whack for the rest of your weeks of revision. Decisional delays are a huge thing, so if you're not planning, you're planning to fail. So now let's look a little bit deeper into what it means to structure your revision and make sure you get through everything that you can and through the most important priorities coming up to this exam. The main thing is that you need to identify your weaknesses, and then using this information, actually go ahead and explore these, figure them out. Apply yourself in some untimed questions, get that 100% accuracy up there, and then you can build fluency by doing questions in a timed sense. And then only then you start thinking about practice past exams. This should be last because the question banks that you're doing before are where you identify where you're having issues with the knowledge. The practice exams themselves are a way for you to simulate exam day, how you deal with a random selection of questions, how you deal with time pressure, focus, keeping that concentration. That's what the exams are for. To begin your revision, the first thing you want to be doing is scoping out the subject, figuring out these weaknesses so you can extremely prioritize the things that actually matter. By not doing this, you're going to screw yourself over by focusing on something that may seem important, but objectively isn't. Focus on the things that are going to be able to get you the most marks in the exam. This usually comes down to concepts, not those little details that you have to remember. They may be the things that you usually forget, but often they do not add up to the majority of marks. I often see this as an area where people with a fixed mindset, which is majority of students, will avoid going deep enough into some of their weaknesses because they don't want to know that they're unprepared. The earlier that you're able to acknowledge this and really definitively figure out where it is that you're struggling, the easier and more quickly you'll be able to figure it out. Some students think by just identifying their weaknesses and doing lots of questions that will be enough to fix it up. I can guarantee you it will have an effect, but when you're going for top marks, pretty much everyone has done all of the practice papers anyway. So you need to find another way to be, putting yourself at an advantage above them. Another trap that I see is that a lot of people think, but just by getting the answer to a specific question right, that they've actually learned the material. There's actually quite a bit of research into this, that our intuition about, using performance in an exam as an indicator of how much has been properly learnt is actually pretty poor. And this is a huge cognitive bias that you have to be so aware of, because you may be tricking yourself into knowing things, but you're actually going to walk into that exam getting more questions wrong. I see this all the time, especially with students who tell me that they felt so confident going into the exam, and then they realize that they've completely screwed it up in the exam. A retrospective revision timetable is always nice to start off with, just because you're always going to be focusing on what's more important for you at that time. The way is by going through, scoping the content, ranking everything out of 3 stars. 3 stars means you don't need to revise it. 2 means you probably need to look at it. And 1 means I definitely need to look at this. And then based off how you block your time for each of your subjects, you start with the 1 stars, then you move to the set 2 stars, and then eventually the 3 stars. Again, make sure that your timetable is not in a chronological order, and that you spend more time on the subjects that you need more work on. The best way that you should go about actually figuring out what you're going to be doing on a week-to-week basis and scheduling your time accordingly is by setting deadlines. This is based off what I was mentioning in the last video around reverse goal setting. If you want to be getting 100% in your exam, you need to think about the goals that you need to be achieving on a week-to-week basis to be able to reach that. Usually 1 week out from an exam, you should only be doing practice papers by that point and fixing up on little things there. You should probably already have a very high level of accuracy before then as well. Also, that last week should really be a buffer. You really shouldn't have much things put in this area because that's getting really close to your exam. And more often than not, if you're 4 weeks out or 3 weeks out from an exam, things will go overtime. And so you want that 1 week grace period before the exam so that when things get pushed back, you still have enough time to get everything done. So what are some goals that you can be setting for yourself? Well, the week out, you want to have done majority of the practice papers that you need, whether that be 3 or 5, but if you don't have better study techniques, then you're gonna have to do more. And I haven't even mentioned yet, practice papers take a really long time to go through. You have to not only do it, it drains you as well, but you have to go through it in as much detail, analyzing the answers that you've gotten correct and wrong. Weeks before that, you may want to figure out, I want to go through all of these topics for physics. I want to go through all these topics from chemistry. You set these deadlines based off what you think is feasible, giving yourself a little bit of leeway, and then you can figure out the time blocks that you need day to day to be able to achieve that. This is the biggest thing that I just want to mention here. It's very reversed. This is the main thing that I want to mention here. It's a very reversed process. You're not thinking about where you are right now up until the exam, you're thinking from the exam backwards. The main thing here is with the deadlines that you set, they have to be proper deadlines. You can't push these back, otherwise it's gonna really put you behind. And so you may need to reprioritize your week halfway through that week because you're realizing, oh, I'm not actually gonna hit my physics deadline of getting all the content done and consolidated. So I'm gonna need to put more time for physics and less for chemistry just because I know I'm better with chemistry. These are sacrifices you ultimately have to make. And if you don't, then the decision will be made for you based off your time and based off how much sleep you can sacrifice. So the main thing that I'm mentioning here is that inaction is an action. by you not choosing something, something will be decided for you instead. So you might as well try and have more control over that by choosing how you're going to prioritize things. Interleaving is one of the most important things that you need to be doing in the revision process. Most people think about interleaving as just doing some maths and then English and then some chemistry and then some physics and then repeat. I'm talking about varied practice. So what I mean is instead of always trying to use the information the same way, doing practice papers, rereading your notes, you want to try and apply it in very different and unfamiliar ways. For example, this may be teaching, this may be doing a brain dump, this may be doing active recall through flashcards if you really needed to. This may involve doing a mind map. This involves practice questions, using thought experiments, this thing called elaborative interrogation or rehearsal, inquiry-based learning to extend and push your knowledge. These are so many ways that you can try and push how much knowledge you have around this sort of concepts. And that's ultimately what you want. You want to extend past what you can already see in front of you in the textbook. Using the same information in many different ways is the most effective way to do interleaving, and the research on this is extremely strong. This in itself is the main way that you're going to be able to prepare for curveball questions, because you are forcing yourself to try and find extra relationships between pieces of information that you may have not expected before. The main way that I like to explain this is if there was a box and you kept rereading your piece of paper, you're going to be looking at that box from the same angle all the time. But if you start to use practice questions, start to teach it to someone, then you're going to be able to look at this box from different angles and know what it looks like from these different angles. You'll have a better overall idea of what the box actually looks like. Being able to push yourself in this way into a sense of discomfort is just this thing called desirable difficulty. And you want to aim for this when you're going through any sort of learning or revision. And this is ultimately what's going to allow the high achievers to be prepared better for curveball questions. Because at the end of the day, a curveball question is just a question that tests you on a relationship that you may have not thought about yet or prioritized in your revision. Practice questions will help you with the easy, medium, and some hard questions, but even still, it's not as efficient as other methods. Another really important thing is you need to be making mistakes during this process. If you're getting a lot of questions right, it may feel good, but you're actually wasting time because you could be doing questions that you get wrong, and you can learn so much more from getting something wrong than when you get something right. It's actually a really good sign, and something I get worried about is if I can't find the things that I'm consistently getting wrong. Another thing as well is that when you make a mistake, you need to actually dissect why you made a mistake with that question. The more that you dig into this, you'll be able to predict what might go wrong for future questions, and then you wouldn't even get that one wrong. By not doing this, you're pretty much telling yourself that I'm happy to make the same mistake again. And really, if you spot that you make the same mistake again, that is clear evidence that you kind of neglected this process and that you have wasted time. A lot of students smash out exams thinking that going through and really analyzing the mistakes is a waste of time. I should just be exposing myself to more, but that's completely wrong. Getting rid of mistakes is what you need to do, and that's going to be the most efficient way to go about your revision. This is why untimed accuracy is one of the best ways to build speed in exams. The biggest way to increase your speed is not by spamming and doing more questions at speed. That will teach you how to rush. That won't actually help you achieve efficiency. There's a very big difference there. Efficiency means you're actually able to do it correctly, and the speed is a natural process because of your accuracy. Rushing is just not really knowing it, but just trying to do it quicker. You're gonna make mistakes, and then identifying those mistakes, then fixing all those mistakes are gonna take far more time, and you might still get the question wrong. The whole point of doing practice questions is to try and find areas for improvement. So if you're doing pretty well on practice papers, you're probably wasting your time, even though it's showing that you're on the right track. And if you're already getting 100% on those exams, then what was the point? It becomes a very ineffective process, especially when you're at the top end of students and you're trying to find every little thing. So if you find yourself with very little time, or you're actually going to have to start cramming for the exam, then you're going to have to change things up. However, the principles that I've mentioned still apply. It just means that you're just going to have to be brutal about your prioritization. You need to make sure that what you're focusing on gives you the biggest return on investment of time. This is all about just prioritizing what is most examinable, what you struggle on the most, and it will follow along everything that I've mentioned before, but you're just going to have to cram now. So I've talked about the 80-20 rule, and this is a very easy and simplistic way of just looking at it. So the 80-20 rule says that the 80% of effects come from the 20% of causes. In other ways, you can just look at this as you need to focus on the 20% most important concepts that are going to take quite a while to understand as well. And this will lead to helping you out with 80% of the marks in your exam. And I see this all the time where people just frantically worry about like, oh, I need to remember this specific fact. Most of the time you can infer that anyway, and they don't really care about that extra detail. They really want to see in an exam if you can really understand the knowledge and apply it. That's what their focus is. Because it's not actually cognitively difficult to go about remembering something. That just is a lot of repetition. But to understand something properly, apply it, is a completely different story. That's what they want to figure out. So when I mentioned the deadlines and the reverse goal setting, you need to do that again, maybe reprioritize, and just make sure that you got enough time to focus on the most important stuff. By the way, mindset and breaks, these are still very important stuff that I haven't just mentioned yet, but you need to prioritize these as well. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to even study. You don't want to get overwhelmed, and I know how crazy exam season can actually be, but just take it one step at a time. Come back to reprioritization, go back to planning. Since you're watching this video, it's gonna be extremely important for you to be focused throughout all of this time, and it's gonna be for long bursts of time as well. So if you really want to learn about how you can be more productive in the time that you actually spend studying, then make sure to check out my video on the Pomodoro technique. That will also help you smash out these exams. So I hope you found this video useful, and all the best for your exams, because I know you've got a lot of study ahead, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.